All right, let's get started, everyone. Thanks so much for joining our webinar today. This is a three-part series that we're putting together. The first part will be, starting at the beginning phases of a job search, making sure that you have your core marketing documents in order. So resume and LinkedIn profile optimization. This is designed for supply chain and related professionals. That's the area that I recruit in and have been for 20 years. Then we'll have part two will take place the exact same time next week, next Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern. We're going to get into job search strategies and networking. Networking during this pandemic era, obviously it's a little more challenging to get out and network in person. And then the week after, we'll conclude this three-part series with interviewing tactics and offer negotiation. So with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. And again, thanks everyone for joining the webinar today. This is going to be recorded, and if you happen to miss it for some reason today, we'll definitely have it recorded. We'll put it up on our YouTube channel, and then we'll send it out to everyone that registered via email. We are experimenting with a new format, trying to go with a little bit less is more in terms of words. So you'll hear me doing a lot of the talking. I won't have as much of many words and as many slides. And I would encourage you to take out, your pencil and a notepad, take some good notes. We're going to cover a lot of material today. You can submit questions through the Zoom application. You should see the window there. So feel free to submit questions. At the end, we'll save about 10 to 15 minutes so we can conduct a Q&A session. So with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. So again, today's webinar topic is on resume and LinkedIn profile optimization. And we're going to cover a quick introduction about my background and firm, SCM Talent Group. We are going to explain how you can connect with us so you can get more advice and resources. Our resources, I've been putting these together, comes from 20 years of recruiting and supply chain, but I got into this business to help people advance their careers, and that's what my focus has been, helping companies find great talent and helping supply chain professionals at all job levels advance their career. So we'll get into the resume aspect, core elements of a strong resume, resume mistakes and so forth, and then we'll talk about LinkedIn. Specifically, how do recruiters search for candidates? I'll give you some screenshots so you can see what we have access to, and then give you some good tips for how you can optimize your profile, so how you can, improve how you can be discovered by employers and recruiters. Then after that, we'll wrap up with the Q&A. So my background, again, Rodney Apple. I'm the founder and president of SCM Talent Group. I have been recruiting my whole career, so about 26 years, and the vast majority of that has been in what I call end-to-end supply chain. And I started out in the corporate side and brought into the Home Depot back when they were Fortune 13 to help lead the recruitment for the build out of their very first supply chain department. That's when I fell in love with supply chain. I knew it was going to be very big. And it has it really evolved over the last 20 years from back when I first started. So from there, I led all the supply chain logistics recruiting for Home Depot. I went to the Coca-Cola company for almost 7 years, led all of their manufacturing, and not done manufacturing before. So I had 22 factories, global sourcing, procurement, all the inventory planning cycles, logistics, and a hodgepodge of other related functions, continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, and so forth. And between those two companies, filled about 1,000 professional to executive level positions. I know I've looked at probably tens of thousands of resumes of supply chain professionals. So I think I've gotten a good and unique perspective that I'm happy to share on this webinar in terms of what recruiters and employers look for and what really makes a resume stand out and helps get that all important job interview. Our website, it's scmtalent.com. We've got a lot of advice there. Like I said, I've been cranking out advice for supply chain professionals, career advancement for many years, so you can find that there. Um, I went from Coke to Kimberly-Clark, again, led their supply chain recruitment, and then I wrapped up my corporate days with Cummins. So all four of those companies made the Gartner top 25 list. So I've definitely been in organizations with lots of transformation and putting in, always trying to raise the bar when it comes to their supply chain organization. So I definitely have seen what great looks like. And some of the other roles that I play in this space, I've been serving as the career coach for ASCM, which stands for the Association of Supply Chain Management, formerly APIX. Since 2014, I also write for their magazine on professional development, which is called SCM now. We have a blog, the Supply Chain Talent blog, which is on our website. Again, the two goals are to help supply chain professionals advance their career and to help companies improve their ability to hire, develop, and retain supply chain talent. So that's my background. We're going to go ahead and get started with the material. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, would love to connect. There's my LinkedIn handle there. We post a lot of content and advice out on social media, in particular Twitter. We have a YouTube channel, so we've got some good video material out there. Again, this webinar will be on our YouTube channel here probably within the next few days, and then we share content on our Facebook page as well. So that's how you can connect with us. Let's get into resume optimization. So I think it's important to understand the goals of a resume. A lot of people make the mistake, a common mistake, of thinking they need to jam-pack the resume with, talking about everything that they've ever done for every job and every employer throughout their career, or even when they're in college. I've seen folks come out of college make the same mistake where they've got 2 pages and they just try to put every single line on there, and that's not the goal. It's not a tell-all document. What you want to do is to have it's a marketing document. So sometimes less is more, and you want to be able to engage your prospects. Now, whether you're doing that from kind of an outbound perspective, where you're reaching out and sending out your resume or applying online, or whether you have it on a job board such as Indeed or Monster or CareerBuilder, one of the many job boards that are out there, so you can be discovered. That's more of the inbound. So you want to be thinking about those audiences. You definitely want to use that resume to engage them. It's obviously showcasing your value, your skills, and experience. And the more significant and the more relevant, the better. But ultimately, the goal of the resume is to simply land job interviews. So think of it again as a marketing tool. You're introducing yourself to employers. You're summarizing a good summary of your skills, experience, education, abilities, and those all important accomplishments. You want to definitely, people look at the resume as well. They're gauging you on your written communication. I can look at resumes, and within a few seconds, I can tell if somebody's got strong written communication or not. And ultimately, you want to make a strong, positive impression with employers and recruiters. And remember the all-important value, because at the end of the day, supply chain is about creating and delivering value. So employers that are looking for supply chain professionals, not just looking at what did you do, but looking at the accomplishments, the value, and the more you can quantify that, the better. And again, think about those channels, the marketing channels. Again, you've got the inbound side. Another term is pull, where you upload your resume. Maybe you have a WordPress site yourself. You want to draw people in so they contact you. And then we've got the outbound side, where you're sending it out, whether it's through email or applying online. So just always remember that you're writing a resume for both typically humans, obviously, and but also sometimes the software that you have out on these applicant tracking systems. Some common resume mistakes that people make. I think it's important to go through these. Not providing contact information. It kind of blows my mind when I come across a resume and you're not giving the full contact information. So make sure you make that very prevalent up top, where it belongs. I'm going to give you a visual here in a minute of my resume. I've had it professionally written by our resume writer, and I love the template. I've seen many resume templates, and we'll be able to provide this template to you as well, and I'll show you how to do that, how to obtain it after we get towards the end here. Make sure you got the right contact information. Obviously, phone number. You want to use your personal email address. You never want to use your work email address or your work phone. Objective statements. You don't want to have this long paragraphs are an enemy to the resume. People are these days. They're busy. They have short attention spans. So you want to make the resume easy to scan, and you want to make it very clear who you are, what you do, what kind of value you provide. And I think it's best to go with some kind of a professional summary up top versus like an objective statement. Seeking my entry-level position in logistics, for example, think of it as more of a power branding statement, and I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. Again, it's not a tell-all document. I've seen resumes that are 8, 9, 10 pages, and they get thrown in the circular wastebasket. You want to keep the resume 1 to 2 pages. You could maybe argue a case to have 3 pages if you're like a senior executive or you're applying for something in C-suite, but honestly, less is more. It's a marketing document. You want to put your most important information on there. It's important to make sure you integrate the right context, and I can give you some examples of of that as well. But context is key, and also keywords as it relates to supply chain. An example would be you're a distribution center manager. Okay, we all know that distribution centers come in all shapes and sizes, especially in terms of the square footage, the number of employees, the level of automation. So you want to convey that, because if someone's managing a 5,000 square foot facility with 10 people, let's say I'm looking for someone that's managing at least a 1,000,000 square foot facility, highly automated, with 800 employees, it's a big difference between like the size, scope, and complexity. So make sure that you're incorporating, the right keywords. We'll get into keywords here in just a bit, as well as that all important context. We also see people make the mistake of loading their resume down with graphs and charts, and I think that's a great thing if you're going into an in-person interview and you're handing someone your resume, or if you're pushing it out through email. But if you're applying online, you got to remember that there's parsing technology. Every time you submit that submit button or send your resume through a job application, it's going to parse electronically, digitally parse that resume, and it's looking for things like contact information, your skills summary, the job experience, your employers, the dates, and so forth. And it'll compile that into a profile. I've used many different applicant tracking systems. I've been through 3 with my own firm, and they're all different. But if you've got all kinds of crazy formatting in there, it comes out sometimes unreadable. So just make sure if it's okay to have 2 resumes too, maybe one that's, basic formatting for applying online, and then having a second resume format. It's okay to have, color and graphs and charts and things like that. You want to make sure you incorporate plenty of white space. Again, think of, the human mind, it reads top down and from left to right, and we're scanning for headings. So if you've got no spacing in between the sections of your resume, it's going to be very difficult to scan, and people just, they get frustrated and they just end up moving on to the next resume. So make sure you've got the right level of formatting. You're incorporating things like bold, using the underline, and so forth. Using too many acronyms, you got to assume that, let's not assume that the person receiving your resume knows everything there is to know about supply chain. A lot of times it's a very complex discipline, and no 2 supply chains are alike either. So, you want to, I don't want to say dumb it down, but, don't put too many acronyms in there. If they're very common, I think most people know what a TMS or a WMS is, for example. It's okay to include those, but don't, just keep it simple is the best advice I have. You want to refrain from, corporate speak or corporate jargon. let's see, like think outside. I can think outside of the box, or good team player. A lot of these are just so overused, oversaturated, and it gets kind of old. uh, Make sure that you are not including any kind of personal information as well. For example, hobbies, your religion, things like that. You just don't want to give anybody a reason. Discrimination is a real thing out there in the workforce, and you don't want to give anybody any reasons to do anything like that. And I'm not saying suggesting everyone does it, but I have seen it before, and so you want to keep that personal information off of there. There's no reason to put um, references available upon request. Guess what? The employers, if they do check references, they're going to reach out to you to request your reference list. So it's just one more of those obvious things. So save that room for some more important information. Again, you don't want to use your work email address. I've seen people do that. Well, if you're looking for a job, you're about to you're about to move on somewhere. If you upload your resume into several different companies' database, guess what? They're going to send you an email, and it's most likely going to bounce back. If you put your work number on there, they're going to call that number, and it's probably going to be answered by someone else that's new that may have taken your place. So make sure you're always using personal information. You definitely want to check using spell check for grammar and spelling mistakes. The most common word that I see that's misspelled on a resume, it's manager. We see the word manger, manger. I see it all the time. So make sure. So spell check's not going to catch that. So it's always good to have a colleague or a friend put an extra set of eyes on there, because it's better safe than sorry. Sometimes people will be hardcore employers when it comes to your resume. So you definitely want to not give them any reason to disqualify you. Another mistake people tend to make is just listing out what they did in terms of their job duties, roles, and responsibilities. It's equally as important to list out your accomplishments, achievements, that ultimately is the value that you delivered for your past employers. And ideally, you want to quantify those results using, dollar points, percentage signs, cost savings, things of that nature. A one-size-fits-all resume. I mean, I think it's okay to have one. Let's say you're a transportation manager. That's all you've done. That's all you want to do. And let's say you focus in maybe a couple of modes like LTL, truckload. And if that's the kind of role that you're targeting, you don't want to broaden into other areas. That's totally fine to have one resume format. But if you've got if you've developed a lot of different skills, you've worked in different jobs. Let's say you've been a warehouse manager, you've been a transportation manager, you've been a procurement manager, and so forth. You may, and if you're targeting more than one type of job, then you may want to put together 2 or 3 types of resumes. So you got one for transportation, you've got one for warehousing, and so forth. So don't try to all the experts will tell you, it's not just me, that try when you're applying to a position, the more significant it is to that role and relevant, the more likely you're going to get a call from that employer. Again, stacks of subparagraphs, avoid those at all costs. It's always best to use action-oriented bullet statements and so forth. So make sure you're doing that, and please refrain from any kind of. I've seen people have some crazy email addresses. jackdanielslover@gmail.com. Keep it professional when it comes to the email address that you're using for your resume. Moving on, so got the core elements of a resume here. This is a copy of my resume, and we'll kind of go through these sections. But before we get to that, there's 3 resume formats. So you've got the reverse chronological. That is the most common, and I would say the most preferred by employers. So it's got basically a summary up top, skills and so forth. And then from there, it gets into the meat of the resume, which is your experience and companies you've worked for and so forth. And it goes through your current or most recent backwards from there. And you definitely want to, people tend to care about what have you done recently. So you definitely want to emphasize your current position and the prior positions. And then as you go back in time, let's say you've been around for in the workforce for 20, 25 years, as you go down, you can de-emphasize, have less information for those types of roles. There's also the functional resume. It's really the least preferred. It's where you go heavy into your skills, your experience, but you don't really get a whole lot into the work history. You see this format. I think the pros of the format is that let's say you're switching careers and your prior work experience is not relevant whatsoever. That's a good time where you can showcase perhaps some transferable skills and experiences more in a functional layout. And there's also the hybrid. So it's called the chrono-functional resume, where typically that first page is going to go through those functional skills, summary, and so forth. And then maybe on the back page you have a rundown of your work history. That's also a good, if you've had some short stints, sometimes that format is optimal as well. So just be wary though that most employers prefer the standard format, which is the reverse chronological. As far as the contact information goes, we kind of talked about the importance of using your personal phone as well as your personal email address, but you want to ensure that if you've got any professional credentials, I recommend putting those up top. Let's say you've got your APIC certified supply chain professional. Putting that CSCP up top is a wonderful idea, so you can kind of stand out amongst the competition. When it comes to your address, what's really, I see a lot of people make the mistake of leaving out their address. They just have name, phone, email, and that's okay. I think if you're open to relocation, but if you're targeting a specific, city or state, let's say you're in Atlanta, for example, very big city, a lot of, very long commutes at times. You definitely want to put in the zip code, ideally the city and the state. I don't think there's a need to put your street address on there, for privacy reasons. But city, state, zip code, because what we do on our end as recruiters, a lot of times we'll search for local candidates. If I get a search, let's say it's in Oklahoma, I'm going to be looking for people. I'm going to run a search on that zip code, and maybe it's 15, 20 miles out from that zip code. And if you don't have your zip code in there, guess what? You're not going to come in that search. That means you're going to get skipped over if I'm looking for someone just like you, and you happen to live in that area. So make sure you're putting that information in. I think a mobile phone number is best. You can also use Google Voice has a number. If you want to completely keep your job search communication separate, you can always set up a free Google Voice number. You can have that forwarded to your main line, and so when a call comes in to that number you set up for your job search, it's going to be something to do with on the employer side, reaching out to your recruiters and so forth. I highly recommend that you put in your LinkedIn profile. Us recruiters, we know how to find people on LinkedIn. We're going to probably look at that anyway. Just make it easy for employers and recruiters to find you on LinkedIn. Optional, if you're.
1 second. There we go. I'm back. Sorry about that. Our call dropped. Okay, so I was back talking about the one-line power statement. You could use, try to think of it as a summary that really speaks to who you are, what you want to do, and kind of the essence of who you are as a supply chain professional. In the skills summary, you can see here on my resume, make sure you've got the right keywords in there, that you're using bullets instead of paragraphs. You've got kind of a mix of your functional, your technical, the all-important soft skills. I think people tend to leave that out, so you want to make sure that you incorporate those as well. And this is also an area that you can customize based on the types of roles that you're applying to. You've also got education, training, associations, and your professional certifications. So again, you want to put the full university name. I'm going to show you why that's important when we get over to the LinkedIn profile here in a minute. Your GPA, I don't know if you're coming out of college, of course, you could put that in there. And I would probably only put it if you have like a 3.0 or above. I didn't have a 3.0 or above, so I usually didn't include that in my resume. Again, if you've got those certifications, you want to reference those as long as they're applicable to the types of roles that you're applying to. Any kind of training and development you'll want to list as well as awards. People love, if you've got awards, achievements, especially if you're coming out of college. You're not going to have a lot of work experience beyond internships, so this just kind of is a great way to showcase any type of leadership experience. If you're members of any associations, you'll want to put those in there as well. I'm a member of, let's see, ASCM, CSCMP, ISM, and several other supply chain and related associations. If you've done any kind of speaking engagements, if you speak multiple language, any kind of volunteer work that you've done, I would say, military experience as well, I think is important. And you might even want to pull this up into your experience, especially if you're coming out of the military. When it comes to, we talked about this a minute ago, showcasing your most relevant to embellish anything on your resume. Background checks can sometimes pick these things up, and I have definitely seen this happen a few times in my career where someone embellishes an employer or especially their degree. We've had it happen several times, even with one client, where someone just put in the wrong GPA or they didn't get the degree that they said they got. They did a background check and the person, basically their offer was reneged. So they lost that opportunity because of making a bad choice. So that's the resume advice that I have. And now we're going to get into the second part of the webinar, which is going to be focused on how do you optimize your LinkedIn profile. And what I'd like to do is start with showing you what us recruiters are using in terms of how we search for candidates. This is actually based on a real search that I had conducted back when I was at the Coca-Cola company. I was looking for a VP of manufacturing for the West region. They had their manufacturing network split up into two regions, East and West. The guy the hiring manager was over all of operations, and he actually came out of craft and said he'd love to have somebody that works from there. So we use a tool called LinkedIn Recruiter. It's the premium license for all of LinkedIn, and it gives you a rich set of filters. So here's what this looks like, and this goes back to the importance of completely filling out your profile, because if you don't, and I put in a certain industry or certain keywords to look for someone like you may not show up. So make sure that you fill it out. LinkedIn does a good job of telling you. They'll tell you if your profile is 100% complete or not. Many people make the mistake of just getting in there and they'll copy the resume and paste it into their LinkedIn profile. Please don't do that. You don't want to no one wants to see a duplicate copy of your resume out on LinkedIn. Can you borrow from your resume? Absolutely. You sure can, but just make sure you think of the LinkedIn profile as more of a supplement. It's a way for you to be discovered, but it's also a way to communicate your unique value proposition and so forth. So we've got filters. We can search everything from titles. In this case, I've got VP or Vice or SVP or EVP, just not quite knowing what Kraft calls their heads of manufacturing. I was running this across the United States. You can see I put in skills like transportation, distribution, and so forth. Industries, definitely looking for somebody coming out of CPG or food. So I've got those in there. Put in some keywords. You can see there's some pretty rich filters to search by zip code, years of experience, the years with their current employer. If I want to try to skip over people that just took a new job, I can certainly do that. How many years have they been in their current position? Have they been in the military before? We can get very specific. So again, that's the reason why you want to make sure you've got the right keywords, you've got the right skills, and so forth. As it relates to keywords, and this is critical, again, this is where you're making sure that you're maximizing your ability to be discovered on LinkedIn. And you don't want to keyword stuff your resume. You never want to do that. You want to make sure the copy reads natural, and you want to sprinkle those keywords into every section of the LinkedIn profile. We're getting ready to go through some visuals, of course, to show you what that looks like. There are some tools that are out there, and you got to, again, we talked about the resume as a marketing document. Well, your LinkedIn profile is a marketing document as well. If you think about how web pages or websites rank for certain keywords. Even with our website, we try to rank for, if somebody's trying to find a recruiting firm that specializes in supply chain, they put in those kind of keywords. We want to come up at the top of Google so they see our information first, and hopefully they like what they see and they contact us, whether it's a candidate or whether it's an employer needing to fill a position. It's the same thing with LinkedIn. It's the same concept. It's called search engine optimization, or SEO is the acronym. And you can run some keyword research. There's some tools. I know Google has, if you Google keyword tool, you can get in there and you can see the popularity. How often is that term searched? And then you want to use those most popular search terms that really drill down and explain, and signify kind of who you are and what you do as a supply chain professional. So I would recommend you may want to read up on some basics of SEO, just so you can kind of get a framework and a understanding of how important keywords are, and then where you need to integrate them into your LinkedIn profile. Another great resource, if you're a member of ASCM, formerly APIX, they have a very robust supply chain dictionary. I think it's got 5,000 different terms. That's another great place to look if you're looking for some keyword ideas. So, going to take a look at my profile real quick. I think it's important, LinkedIn gives you a very vanilla, very bland header image. So you can use a tool like Canva. We use it all the time. Our marketing manager uses it to create, created this one for me. And I don't think I told you guys I'm writing a book on supply chain careers. That's why I want to spotlight this. We're in the editing phases. So, it's going to be a book about how to launch your career. What are the career paths in supply chain? How do you advance your career all the way from entry level, all the way to like a head of supply chain. And so I wanted to put the book cover on there, just so it stands out, because that's coming out soon. And it's taken years, but I'm very proud of that. I think most importantly, you want to, the first thing people are going to look at is that professional headline. So you want to make sure that it kind of captures the essence again of who you are. Don't just put your job title. Kind of make sure it summarizes, who you are and what you're looking to do, or where you want to focus, how you help people, the value you deliver. Think about a format that could include the type of position you work in, what you're all about, and then, some additional information, some examples, supply chain transformation, consumer products, if you want to reference the industry that you really want to focus in on. Let's say you work in supply chain technology or systems, so you want to put supply chain technology. Transformation is hot. Risk management is hot. A lot of these areas are hot right now. Supply chain network optimization. So you get the sense here. You want to make sure that it stands out and it's not just some boring, I'm a logistics manager at Acme Corporation. And that's what LinkedIn will default it to if you don't put something in there unique. So make sure you've got something in there that stands out, because that's the first thing that we see, us recruiters and employers see, or anyone that sees your LinkedIn profile. Make sure the headshot is professional. You don't want to have a picture of you at the bar holding a beer or drink. You don't want to be hanging out with, you've got two people to your side. You definitely want to make sure you've got a professional looking headshot. You don't need to put on, professional business attire, but you don't want to be wearing a t-shirt either. So make sure you've got that buttoned up. Moving along. And I think this is probably the most important part of the LinkedIn profile section is the summary. So you see, it'll say the word about. Now, with my profile, it's a bit different. I'm not looking for a job. I'm looking for, showcasing how I help people and the value I bring and who I've done this work for, what I specialize in, and so forth. So my profile's a bit different. It's more, kind of B2B, if you will, in terms of seeking out let's say new clients or new candidates to work with and whatnot. So, you want to summarize your expertise, again, how you help people, the value you deliver. I've been featured in quite a few of the supply chain trade journals, so I just wanted to reference that. What differentiates me from others that are in the same line of work, and then I kind of get into the keywords there. As an end-to-end supply chain recruiter, for 20 years, I've pretty much touched just about everything under that supply chain umbrella, and I wanted to make sure that I convey that in terms of what are the most popular keywords that people might search for. So these are the areas that I specialize in, from logistics to procurement to planning to continuous improvement to manufacturing and the operation side of the supply chain as well. You got about 2,000 characters, so use it wisely. You might be wondering, well, how'd you get those little blue arrow points in there? If you Google Unicode, you can go in there and there's all kinds of websites that have Unicode. It's basically a great way for you to have some, beyond the standard bullets and asterisks, to help segment and showcase your most important information. Again, it's a high-level overview. Who you are, what do you have to offer? Showcase some of those key accomplishments. You definitely want to have rich media. You can see that I've got, let's see, I recently posted an article, What's This Pandemic Hint? We compiled a list of talent and career development resources. We wanted to put our best stuff in one place because we knew a lot of people were losing their job. What is it, 40 million people so far and counting. I know that I'm getting inundated with people. So I know I can just sense that there's a lot of people out there looking, and that's what we want to do is help. So I showcase that. And then, our recruiting process, who we are as a company. There's a bunch of other videos that we put in there and so forth. As a job seeker, you want to do the same thing. And what could you put in there? As long as it's not confidential, you've done some kind of a project, maybe it was a school project, or maybe you were in part of implementing some kind of a technology solution. The ideas are really limitless or just endless. You could put in a presentation, a PDF, a PowerPoint, a video. You can link it to any page on the internet. So just make sure you don't want to jam this with too much information, but pick out some of the most significant and relevant. I'm going to use that term quite a bit. That's going to help you stand out. Make sure you capture those core, all important functional, technical, leadership experience that you have and skills, as well as soft skills. Again, Canva is a fantastic tool for creating, images and things like that that you can use for inserting rich media. You definitely want to fill out the work experience. Do you have to go back to your first job? This is where the resume is different than the LinkedIn profile. I think I go back to all of the positions I've held on mine, but all of mine are in recruiting, and most of them relate to some kind of a supply chain recruiting job. So I chose to put all those in there. If you've got some experience that you've had early on that's not that relevant, you can definitely, this is a place where you can leave that work experience out. So again, keywords. You want to make sure you're integrating the right keywords into your title, because remember, recruiters will search by keywords against the whole profile, and we'll also search by keywords against titles. Sometimes we're looking against the current title. Sometimes we might look against the current and the past title. So if you don't fill those out, you may not come up in a search. And let's say your employer uses a very basic title across the organization. I know when I was at Home Depot, it's pretty popular to see the title logistics manager. They'd have the same job description. And they'd use it across all the different departments under that supply chain umbrella. And I know that's confusing to job seekers sometimes when you're like, okay, you got 80 postings for logistics manager. They're not all the same. They're all very different. So you want to make sure that you're using something. And this is where maybe you put logistics manager in parentheses. You put something that's like that. It gets a little more detailed in terms of what you did. Let's say you were the LTL transportation manager. You can put those kind of keywords in there. Again, you want to put in the summary. LinkedIn makes it really easy these days for us recruiters or employers to click on your employer and go to their business pages. If we don't know who they are, we can quickly, within just one click find out who they are. So I like to put in, since we're a small company, less than 10 employees, I'm going to put in kind of a quick snapshot of who SCM Talent Group is. We've got practice areas that span across the supply chain functions. So we put put some more rich media in there, and you should do the same. And then I go back to there's my ASCM volunteer experience there with, serving as the career coach. So any kind of volunteer experience, you can put that in there as well, and so forth. Make sure you complete all the, continuing downward, you're going to come up to your education. I see a lot of job seekers make the mistake of just leaving it out, thinking it's not that important. Well, guess what? Going back to those filters we have, if I'm looking for somebody with a college degree, that's what my client's looking for. It's a minimum requirement. Well, guess what? If I search for a degree, you have one, but you don't put it into LinkedIn, you are not going to show up in my search, and you could get skipped over for a great opportunity. So make sure you're completing that. And after that, you got your skills and endorsements. You can see I've got supply chain management, and talent acquisition, probably my big three. I've got 99 plus people that have endorsed me for that, to include colleagues from companies that I've worked at, such as Cummins. I've got recommendations as well. You definitely want to get recommendations. That is just same thing as having, kind of a reference, your references out in the public domain. They can be very powerful. I kind of stopped asking for them years ago after I accumulated 12 or so, I think, actually 19. The more the merrier, in my opinion. Plus, you're going to get more keywords on your profile. So there's nothing wrong with asking. When you do ask, I definitely recommend that you call the reference. Let's say it's a former manager you work for. I would recommend that you call them and say, hey, I'm going to be sending you an invitation to give me a reference. Are you willing to do that? Just kind of get their permission and give them the heads up, because a lot of times you hit that button, it can get lost in the LinkedIn platform, and then you're going to be like, oh man, the person didn't give me a good reference. So you don't want to do that. Always reach out and give them the heads up and get their permission. They're more likely to write you a good reference when you do that. Moving onward, if you've done any kind of projects, let's say you belong to associations, you've been published in some kind of a trade journal, magazine, or whatnot, this is a great place to showcase that information. I need to update this on mine. This is probably a couple years since I've revisited this, but I put some of our blog posts in there, and I've been featured in some of the trade journals. Again, just a great way to show off your expertise. And obviously, it is a rich place to put in more keywords. And again, that can help you when people search for people with your background. And there's some of the interest I have in terms of some of the companies and so forth that I follow. One last thing too, a great exercise that I recommend everyone do is get out on LinkedIn and search. Think of the keywords that people might be using to search for you, or the keywords that you want to rank for when someone like me searches for you. So let's say you're a S&OP director. Put in S&OP director, or director of S&OP, or director of sales and operations planning. Take a look at the profiles that come up, and study those profiles. Start with number 1, 2, 3, get down the list. Take a notepad out, or even better yet, a screenshot. Maybe put them into some kind of a Word doc, and then you can analyze and assess. You certainly don't want to copy and clone anyone's profile. That's a huge no-no, plagiarism. You want to be creative, but get a sense for like, why is that person ranking number 1? What have they done in their profile? How many times have they used S&OP throughout their profile? Count it up. And that can give you a sense of how you might want to shape your profile as well. I want to point you out just a couple of resources here, then we're going to get into the Q&A. Not everyone is, I know I'm not that great myself. I'm good at spotting what a great resume looks like. I've got pretty good at that, having looked at tens of thousands. But not everybody's good at writing. And writing about yourself is one of the hardest things to do. Even with our About page, I've rewritten it, I don't know how many dozens of times. If you feel like you need some assistance, feel free to reach out, rodney.apple@scmtalent.com. be happy to take a quick peek at the resume. And we do have a resume template that we have here that I can pass your way as well. It's comes from I think it was spawned maybe from the Wharton Business School, and it's been modified probably since then. But it was the one I showcased. I think it's a great format. I'll be happy to flip it over to you, and then from there, you can use it at your discretion. And if you get to a place though where you're just still not feeling good about your resume, you think you need some professional help, we do have a great resume writer. I've referred many dozens of people to him, even some of my family members. And all of them have had good feedback. He actually has recruited and worked in corporate recruiting in the supply chain logistics space. So he definitely knows the area. He does great work. I don't get anything out of it. I just like to have a good partner to refer people to. So let me know if you have any interest in that. He also helps to optimize LinkedIn profiles. If you would like to have your resume in our database, just want to make you aware of how you do that. scmtalent.com, go to job seekers, and at the very top there, you'll see a button that says submit resume. It takes about less than 30 seconds to sign in and upload your resume. Then it's in our database. It's the first place our recruiters go every time we get a new search assignment. So feel free to do that if you like. If you don't, no big deal. With that, just a quick announcement. Again, next week, same time, same channel, we're going to have part 2. Part 2 is going to be all about, now that you got your resume and your LinkedIn profile optimized, we're going to shift gears into how do you develop and execute a winning job search strategy. It's going to include networking tactics, because from my vantage point, networking is where the magic occurs. Obviously, you can't get out and do that in person these days, so we're going to talk especially about online and digital networking tactics. From there, the week of on June 17th, we're going to conclude the 3-part series, getting into, now that you've landed some, you've got some bites on your resume, you've got some interviews set up. We're going to talk about interviewing tactics, what to do before in terms of preparation, how do you conduct an interview, and what you need to do right afterward to ensure your success as it relates to following up and getting ideally a second interview or even better yet, an offer. And then we're going to get into offer negotiation tactics, so you can have some strategies and tactics to get the best possible offer that you deserve. So with that said, let's get into Q&A. I'm going to open up my Q&A screen just real quick. Let's see here. All right, so what is your opinion on sending out cover letters? Are they important or more of an option? That's a great question. I didn't get into cover letters today, obviously. So from my vantage point, now that everything's kind of gone digital, back in the old days when I started, I'm going to date myself here, but we had ads in newspapers, and resumes would come in through a fax machine, and then we would catalog them in file cabinets. So things have changed quite a bit. I believe in cover letters, not so much in the traditional, you've got a second attachment that you're going to provide. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but at the end of the day, I feel like, when you're think of it as a sales letter. Again, you want to make it unique. You don't want to have the same exact information as that's contained in your resume. But when you're applying to positions, at the end of the day, you want to show them who I am quickly, why I'm interested, what I bring to the table. How does your background align with that role? And I think cover letters are great to do that. If you're applying to one kind of a position, we use the transportation manager as an example before. You may get by with one cover letter. If you're applying to 3 types of jobs, you got 3 types of resumes, it would behoove you to have 3 cover letters. Think of them as a template, though. Have the template, a skeleton, if you will, an outline, or you can kind of customize that around the type of position you're applying to. If you're emailing your resume or sending it through LinkedIn, honestly, I don't think you attach a cover letter. I think you bake that information right into the body of the email or the body of that LinkedIn direct message. I think it has a better chance of getting read, and you want to keep it short and simple. Avoid the stacks of paragraphs and all the other formatting basics that I gave you. So, are they required? Some employers like them, some don't. I'm personally not. I rarely read them myself. I get what I need off the resume and then through a conversation typically. But I would probably err on the side of including them is probably a good rule of thumb as opposed to not. Do you have any advice for receiving endorsements for your skills on LinkedIn? It kind of goes back to, I don't think endorsements, I mean, um, sure, we look at them, the most popular, in other words, the most amount of endorsements you have, they're going to show up at the very top. As you build out your network and you gain more connections, you're naturally going to get more endorsements. I didn't ask people for my endorsements. And you also want to give them, because what I found is the more you go out and give people endorsements, the more you're going to receive in return. Obviously, though, you can connect with whether it's classmates especially your colleagues, coworkers, your managers, especially your former managers, really anybody in your network that you have a good relationship with. You can always reach out and say, hey, would you come out there and give me an endorsement? And you may want to do that, especially if you're young in your career, early in your career, just to kind of get something there. Same thing with reference, or those references, you want to reach out, call that individual first. Next question, let's see. Um, do you feel hiring a professional resume writer is needed? And honestly, that's all going to come down to you. um, you know, I have seen people uh, have their resume written by a professional, and it has absolutely propelled their career to new heights. But I feel like most people are capable of writing a good resume if you've got the right advice and the right tactics, and you've got some people to show it to that can give you some feedback. The problem with that, though, is everybody's got a unique opinion. I've got my own opinion on what great looks like, what good looks like, what awful looks like. But if you are not getting, callbacks, people aren't responding to your resume, then it probably needs some help. So it really comes down to your, are you getting anywhere with your job search? Are you getting invitations to interview? And if you're not, it probably makes sense to have somebody take a second look at and potentially have it rewritten. I mean, again, I'm not that great at writing it. Mine's kind of basic. I had mine rewritten. I just shared it with you. I'm a huge fan of that format, having seen every format under the sun. I was very intrigued with that, because it's just, it stands out. It comes down to the formatting, and it comes down to making it a marketing document. And when you've got an expert out there that can do that, and if they can land you a good job with more pay, well, what's the ROI on that? That's how you have to think of it. What's the ROI that I can get? Can I get a better job with higher pay? Then sometimes that can be worth it. I just got my MBA in supply chain, but I really need some experience. I am willing to work. How can I move? I'm not sure. Um, if you've gone through your undergrad and you went straight in to get your MBA, you don't see that too often. Most people will go out and get maybe a year or two experience. They'll go back and get their MBA. But let's say you continue through with education. Internships are critical at that point in time. You should always try to strive. And I would say early on, seek out internships, because coming out of college with zero internship and zero experience, it's going to be very challenging. And so at that point, if that's your case, you want to be a little bit more open. If you're focused in on one job, you probably want to expand that. Or if you're focused in on one industry or even one geography, I would say you want to expand your horizons. The more you do, the more opportunities, the more doors that are going to open. So that's what I would recommend there. How do you address gaps in the resume? Great question. So I'm a huge fan of transparency. And what that means is, if you've got massive gaps in your resume, let's say you went back to school, let's say you took some time off to take a sabbatical, let's say you had some aging or ill parents that you needed to take care of. Those things happen. It's part of life. I'm a big fan. Let's say you went you decided you're going to raise your kids, and then they get to school, you want to go back to work. Well, don't just have that 5-year gap on there, and there's just there's no explanation. Just put a little blurb in there that says, took time off to raise my children, took time off to care for my elderly parents. People understand if you put in there. What you don't want is not putting anything in there, and then you got employers, because employers sometimes do make a lot of assumptions. So you definitely want to make sure that that you're transparent when it comes to short stints. Are the majority of employers using applicant tracking systems to speak with and call candidates? These tools, like a lot of technologies, are getting very robust. I can't speak to what all employers are doing. I can assure you, though, large corporations will have a very robust applicant tracking system. I would argue mid-sized companies, do your mom and pop, small employers, startups have an applicant tracking system? Probably not. They're probably having resumes go into an email address, and then somebody's going to weed through all that. I feel sorry for that person. What they are using ATS systems for, a lot of times you'll see what they call pre-qualifying questionnaires. You might have something that says, do you have at least a certain degree? Do you have X amount of years of experience or more? Make sure you answer those truthfully, because if they're looking for somebody with 5 years or, and you're coming out of college and you put, I've got 5 years, it's just not going to look good when they contact you and you have to explain, sorry, I was just wanting a callback. So make sure you're honest. But employers are using it to filter. They're looking at those keywords we talked about. So you want to make sure you got the right keywords without keyword stuffing your resume. But absolutely, they're using them to pre-qualify. They're also using, sometimes they'll match the job description, like what are the keywords on there? What are the keywords on the resumes coming in? And I don't know what these algorithms, they're all different, just like all the social media sites, Google, Facebook, they all have their own proprietary algorithm. They're all different. So you just got to remember that there's no two ATS systems that are alike, but you got to understand that technology is getting smarter, or is it getting dumber? I don't know. But you want to make sure that you're putting in the right keywords in the right places, so you can kind of get through that ATS, and then keep the formatting simple. Don't try to get too crazy with charts and graphs and so forth. So folks, I think we are out of time. I went over a couple of minutes. Again, if you'd like a copy of the resume format, it's rodney.apple@scmtalent.com. If you need some professional help, I'll be happy to give you an introduction or referral to our professional resume writer. He also does LinkedIn profiles. And that's kind of the least we could do to help you out. We do hope that you enjoyed this webinar. Just know that we're going to have a replay that we'll be getting over to you through email. We're going to put that up on our YouTube channel. So we'll have that out to you shortly, just in case you missed something. And we hope that we see you on the next webinar next Wednesday, where again, we're going to cover job search strategies and networking tactics. So for now, in the meantime, everyone, hope you stay safe and healthy and sane. I know there's a lot of crazy things going out there. Just know that supply chain is a great spot to be in. There's a lot of capital investment that's going to be made into supply chain going forward. I know the market is slow right now, but everybody I'm talking to feels like it's going to come back and rebound. So just hang in there, and we'll hope to see you next week. Thanks so much.